In recent years, facial recognition technology has emerged as one of the most controversial and widely debated tools in the realm of surveillance and biometric data collection. While originally touted as a law enforcement aid meant to locate violent criminals and missing persons, the technology's scope has expanded dramatically, often without sufficient oversight or consent from the individuals it tracks. In the latest development of this ongoing surveillance debate, a New York City-based startup has entered the spotlight for scraping social media platforms to create a massive reference database of faces, which is now being used to identify individuals attending protests, including peaceful student-led demonstrations. The backlash against this startup, reminiscent of the earlier controversy surrounding Clearview Intelligence, centers on the secretive and often ethically murky methods used to collect biometric data. Clearview had previously agreed not to license its technology outside of law enforcement agencies after widespread outrage and legal challenges. However, this new startup appears to have found ways to circumvent such restrictions. Unlike Clearview, this company is reportedly offering its services to a broader array of clients, including advocacy organizations, private companies, universities, and even political activist groups. The potential consequences of this expansion are alarming to privacy advocates, legal experts, and civil rights organizations alike. The founder of the company has openly stated that the software is intended to identify people who support political attacks, a claim that may initially seem aimed at preserving public safety. However, critics have pointed out how dangerously vague and subjective this terminology is. Without clear standards or accountability, the system can be used to categorize peaceful protesters, political dissidents, or anyone who expresses dissent as threats. In effect, it grants powerful entities the ability to track and label individuals based on their appearance at political events, often without their knowledge or consent. One of the most disturbing aspects of the company's operations is the use of images scraped from social media accounts. Many people upload photos to platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter without realizing that those images can be accessed, stored, and used to train facial recognition algorithms. These photos, combined with metadata, online activity, and other digital breadcrumbs, can be transformed into comprehensive profiles that identify not only who someone is, but also where they go, who they associate with, and what they believe. Once this information is made accessible to third parties, including politically motivated organizations, it becomes a powerful tool for surveillance, manipulation, and control. According to reports, the startup's technology includes a demo that shows how easily a probe photo, an image taken at a protest or rally, can be matched to public-facing reference images. In one case, the demo matched a face in a crowd to a corporate employee profile found on a company's website. This level of tracking ability, powered by advanced intelligence learning programs, raises urgent questions about the limits of privacy in the digital age and who gets to decide how and why someone's data is used. Compounding the issue is the revelation that the founder of the company, Hawila, has shared the results of these facial recognition searches with advocacy groups. These actions have sparked allegations of doxing, the public exposure of personal information with malicious intent. In political contexts, doxing can have severe consequences, including job loss, harassment, or physical danger. Critics argue that sharing this information, even if done with the goal of promoting security, effectively weaponizes personal data against individuals who may simply be exercising their constitutional rights to assembly and free speech. The company, however, defends its product as an intelligence and mass surveillance project meant to assist law enforcement and community security in identifying threats. In its marketing, the software is described as a tool for non-governmental organizations, activist groups, corporations, and educational institutions to identify individuals who may harbor malicious intent or engage in online criminal activity. But this vague and malleable language opens the door to abuse. What one organization sees as malicious may simply be political dissent or unpopular opinion. The expansion of this kind of surveillance signals a dangerous shift in how society views privacy and civil liberties. Once facial recognition is normalized and quietly integrated into everyday life, it becomes harder to challenge its presence. There is a growing fear among digital rights activists that we are hurtling toward a surveillance state, where our every move, both online and offline, is recorded, analyzed, and used against us. The fact that such surveillance is being developed and deployed by private actors rather than through transparent government programs with legal safeguards makes the issue even more concerning. Throughout the last decade, journalists, whistleblowers, and privacy activists have worked tirelessly to expose the growing reach of government surveillance programs. Major leaks from intelligence insiders, such as Edward Snowden, revealed the extent to which agencies like the NSA and CIA were collecting massive troves of data on ordinary citizens, often without warrants or oversight. These revelations shocked the public and sparked global conversations about privacy, consent, and digital autonomy. However, while the world focused on government overreach, private companies quietly began building their own surveillance infrastructures, often with even fewer limitations. Now, we see private startups like the one in New York City exploiting publicly available information in ways that bypass traditional checks and balances. With limited legal precedent to guide or restrict the use of biometric data, these companies operate in a grey zone. This legal ambiguity makes it difficult for victims of such surveillance to seek recourse or accountability. Furthermore, it creates a dangerous precedent. If collecting and weaponizing facial data is seen as acceptable by private firms, it may encourage more companies to engage in similar practices. The growing unease around facial recognition software has led to calls for reform. Legal scholars, advocacy groups, and some lawmakers are pushing for stricter biometric data laws, transparency in how facial recognition tools are developed and used, and limits on who can access and use such software. Some states and cities have already enacted legislation that restricts the use of facial recognition in policing or public spaces, citing concerns over racial bias, false positives, and the chilling effect on free expression. However, federal legislation remains slow to catch up. Efforts to raise public awareness are also critical in the fight against surveillance overreach. Digital literacy and transparency about how data is collected, shared, and used can empower individuals to make informed decisions about their privacy. Activists and watchdog organizations are now focusing on exposing not just government surveillance, but the growing threat posed by corporate surveillance networks. From browser tracking to social media data harvesting, the ways in which our identities are commodified are expanding at an alarming rate. For those concerned with civil liberties, the line between security and suppression is becoming increasingly blurred. The use of facial recognition software to identify protesters, people who are often engaging in constitutionally protected activities, represents a direct threat to democratic values. It has the potential to deter participation in public discourse, suppress dissent, and punish individuals for their beliefs. As long as these technologies continue to develop without strong ethical oversight, public accountability, and legal boundaries, their misuse is not a possibility, but a certainty. The growing unease around facial recognition technology isn't limited to the private sector. Many individuals and advocacy organizations have voiced strong concerns that government agencies could easily gain access to such tools, or more alarmingly, that they already possess similar or even more advanced surveillance capabilities. While private startups like the one operating out of New York City raise eyebrows due to their aggressive data scraping and vague marketing language, critics argue that the potential collaboration or quiet acquisition of this technology by government agencies only deepens the threat. The line between private innovation and state power has always been porous when it comes to surveillance, and history has shown that governments often adopt new technologies long before the public is fully aware of their scope or application. These programs not only tracked communications and metadata, but also collected massive troves of personal information under the guise of national security. The concern now is that facial recognition tools developed by startups, especially those that collect data from social media platforms, could become part of the government's surveillance arsenal, either through direct partnerships or covert data sharing agreements. Once this kind of technology enters the hands of state actors, the scale and depth of surveillance capabilities could grow exponentially. One of the more alarming scenarios involves the possibility of government agencies using facial recognition to identify individuals at peaceful protests or political rallies, much like the private NYC startup is accused of doing. This capability could allow governments to compile lists of dissenters, activists, and politically outspoken citizens without requiring warrants, formal investigations, or due process. In authoritarian regimes, such surveillance could lead to immediate consequences such as detention, intimidation, or blacklisting. Even in democratic societies, the mere possibility of being tracked and monitored may discourage people from expressing their views or participating in civil movements, thus chilling free speech and civic engagement. Beyond protests, facial recognition could be employed to monitor everyday behaviors. For example, it could be used to track people entering certain religious institutions, attending political meetings, or visiting sensitive locations. In workplaces, employers could use it to monitor employees' movements, behavior, or even emotional expressions, opening the door to new forms of labor control. In public spaces, persistent monitoring through facial recognition-powered surveillance cameras could eliminate any sense of anonymity, reducing public life to a constant state of observation. The mere presence of such technology can influence behavior, leading individuals to self-censor or alter their routines out of fear of being watched. Another deeply concerning application involves predictive profiling, where facial recognition systems are combined with artificial algorithms to forecast individuals' potential behavior based on appearance, emotional cues, or associations. While this may sound like science fiction, it is already being explored in various law enforcement and corporate security settings. If implemented on a wide scale, such systems could label people as potential threats without any proof of wrongdoing, leading to preemptive interventions that undermine basic legal rights. This kind of algorithmic judgment could disproportionately affect marginalized communities already burdened by systemic bias in policing and surveillance. Additionally, the use of this technology for doxing and online harassment is already becoming a real-world threat. As demonstrated by the NYC startup's circulation of identification results to advocacy groups, once someone is identified via facial recognition, their personal data can be weaponized. In the wrong hands, this can lead to harassment, targeted attacks, threats, or even physical violence. Such doxing can occur without any formal legal action, and victims are often left with little recourse. Furthermore, there's the risk of data breaches and misuse. Once biometric data is collected and stored, it becomes a highly attractive target for hackers. Unlike passwords, biometric information, such as facial features, cannot be changed or reset. If compromised, this data can be used for identity theft, fraud, or unauthorized surveillance across a person's lifetime. The long-term implications of such a breach are severe, especially as facial recognition technology becomes integrated into banking, travel, healthcare, and other essential services. The lack of clear regulation or oversight surrounding facial recognition tools only worsens public fear. Without laws in place that govern how such data is collected, who can access it, and how it may be used, there are few safeguards to prevent abuse. The current patchwork of local and state-level bans or restrictions in the US is insufficient to keep pace with rapidly advancing technology. At the federal level, proposed legislation has yet to be passed, leaving a legal vacuum that allows these systems to be deployed with little transparency. In response, privacy advocates, technologists, and legal scholars are calling for robust legislation that prioritizes consent, transparency, and accountability. They argue that the deployment of facial recognition technology, whether by private companies or government agencies, must be subject to rigorous scrutiny and public debate. As facial recognition becomes more common and powerful, the potential for misuse grows alongside its capability. Without firm protections in place, societies risk sliding into a future where surveillance is normalized, dissent is suppressed, and anonymity is impossible. Ultimately, the controversy surrounding facial recognition isn't just about technology. It is about the kind of society we want to build and the rights we are willing to protect. When citizens feel watched and catalogued, the very foundation of democratic freedom begins to erode. This is not a distant or abstract threat. It is happening now, in real time, under the guise of security and innovation. If the public does not act to demand limits, transparency, and accountability, the expansion of facial recognition technology could redefine privacy, civil liberties, and power itself for generations to come.